He was a legend whose name echoed through the halls of music history. Yet, somehow, Leon Russel was never the star he should have been. For decades, his music defined genres and the lives of many iconic artists, but his story remains shrouded in mystery. How did the man who shaped the sound of an era suddenly disappear at his peak? It turns out that Leon Russel faced some extremely heartbreaking and deeply personal challenges that he never let the general public see. But Cher, who had a hidden connection to Leon, finally revealed something about him that is so shocking you would never have imagined it. Once you find out the truth, it will definitely change the way you'll remember both of these legends forever. The early life and career of Leon Russel. They were two names you didn't often hear in the same sentence, but behind the scenes, Cher and Leon Russel had a connection most people never knew about. She was the glamorous pop queen with a voice that could shake an arena, while he was the piano-playing outlaw who drifted through rock, country, soul, and gospel like a wandering spirit. They lived in different worlds, but something tied them together. But to understand her words, we need to understand the man Leon Russel was. He was a mystery, wrapped in sunglasses and a long beard, a genius behind so many songs people never knew he wrote. He played with legends, he made stars, and he fought demons most people never saw. Leon Russel wasn't born famous. He was born Claude Russell Bridges on April 2, 1942, in Lawton, Oklahoma. Lawton was a quiet town, not exactly the kind of place you'd expect a rock legend to come from. But even as a kid, Leon wasn't like the others. He was shy, soft-spoken, and suffered from a damaged second and third vertebrae, which occurred after he got injured at birth. That injury caused a slight paralysis in the right side of his body and affected 3 fingers on his right hand. Leon fell in love with music really early. His parents knew they had something special, and so, by the time he was 4, he was already learning how to play the piano, and while learning it, he also picked up the alto saxophone, the cornet, and the baritone horn. At school, he joined the school band, and while he was still a teenager, Leon was already performing in nightclubs around Tulsa. He was too young to be inside, so he carried a fake identity card that said he was 21. That's how badly he wanted to play. But he wasn't chasing fame back then. He just loved the music. He played rock and roll, country, and even gospel. Tulsa in the 1950s had a small but growing music scene, and Leon was right in the middle of it. He joined a local band called the Starlighters, and it wasn't long before he became a known name around town. But Tulsa was too small for someone like Leon. After graduating from high school, he moved to Los Angeles to begin chasing his dream. He didn't bother to attend college because that wasn't his real plan. He wanted to work and be in the studios where he belonged. However, things weren't all rosy in Los Angeles. He once said, "I got out to California, and they were more serious about their liquor laws. I almost starved to death because it was so much harder to find work at my age." In Los Angeles, Leon started working as a session musician. Back then, session players didn't get a lot of credit. They were the invisible hands behind hit records. But Leon's playing stood out. His piano had a certain rhythm to it that made it sound full of feeling. He joined the Wrecking Crew, a group of top-tier session musicians who played on countless big hits. If you were listening to pop or rock in the 1960s, chances are you were hearing Leon Russel, even if you didn't know it. He played on records for the Byrds, the Beach Boys, and the Rolling Stones. He backed up Frank Sinatra, played piano for Bob Dylan, and even worked with Phil Spector during the famous Wall of Sound era. He was literally everywhere and was everyone's secret weapon. But Leon didn't want to stay in the background forever. In the late 1960s, he started writing songs that were deep, emotional, and blended gospel, rock, country, and blues. His lyrics were raw and honest. His voice had a unique sound, and slowly, people started noticing. One of his early songwriting successes came with Joe Cocker. Leon co-wrote and arranged the music for Cocker's Delta Lady, and helped shape the sound of his legendary Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour. Leon was the band leader, the arranger, the glue that held the whole wild, unpredictable tour together. And it was loud, chaotic, and brilliant. By 1970, Leon had released his debut solo album, Leon Russel. It featured a mix of original songs and covers, including a haunting version of A Song for You, a track that would later be covered by everyone from Ray Charles to Donny Hathaway to Amy Winehouse. And that song eventually became a kind of signature for him. Then came the hits. In 1972, Leon released Carney, which included the single Tightrope. It was a strange little song that sounded part circus, part blues, but it worked. It climbed the charts, and for a moment, Leon Russel was a full-blown rock star. But he wasn't just a performer. He was a producer too. Leon founded Shelter Records with Denny Cordell, and together they signed artists like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and J.J. Cale. He produced and played on countless albums. He even worked with Bob Dylan during the Rolling Thunder Revue. He also had a deep connection to gospel music. His album, Leon Live, featured gospel choirs and high-energy church-style arrangements. He loved the raw emotion of gospel and brought it into the rock world like no one else had. But fame never seemed to sit comfortably on Leon's shoulders, and not everyone knew what to make of him. He didn't smile for the cameras, he didn't chase headlines, and he sure didn't play by the rules. In an industry full of polished acts and picture-perfect stars, Leon showed up barefoot, wild-haired, and unapologetically strange. He didn't want to fit in, he wanted to create something real. And for some in Hollywood, that made him dangerous. And not everyone liked that, because Leon Russel didn't just defy expectations, he made people uncomfortable. And that's where the controversy began. The outsider in Hollywood. For most people, fame is something to chase. For Leon Russel, it was something to dodge. Even at the height of his success, when his name was lighting up marquees and his songs were climbing the charts, Leon never played the celebrity game. He didn't dress like a pop star. He didn't talk like one either. In interviews, his answers were short, and sometimes he didn't speak at all. While he was a brilliant man, he was also quite strange, and some people didn't know what to make of him. But Leon didn't care if they did. He lived like a nomad for most of his life, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He was always on the road, sometimes with a touring caravan of musicians, sometimes alone. He'd hop from city to city, often slipping away before anyone realized he was gone. That restlessness wasn't just about the road, it was how he survived the spotlight. The moment things started to feel too exposed, too controlled, and too polished, Leon would vanish. And when he did settle somewhere, it wasn't in a fancy mansion in Beverly Hills. He liked his space quiet, messy, and filled with instruments. He once built a full recording studio inside his home, just so he wouldn't have to leave. Not even for a session. That's how private he was, and how protective he was of his world. To some in Hollywood, that made him difficult. The word came up a lot in conversations about him. Some others said he was too uncompromising. In fact, people who worked with Leon claimed that it was like stepping into another universe, one where he made the rules, and you either adjusted or left. And sadly, a lot of people did leave. But the ones who stayed got something rare and real. Despite his quirks, or maybe because of them, Leon was deeply respected. You don't end up in the studio with Bob Dylan, George Harrison, and Elton John if you're just some oddball from Oklahoma. Those guys didn't just work with Leon, they admired him. George Harrison, in particular, was drawn to Leon during the early 1970s. When Harrison was organizing the concert for Bangladesh, one of the first major benefit concerts of its kind, he handpicked Leon to join the lineup. And Leon didn't just play a song or two. He tore the stage down with awesome tracks, hammering the piano like it owed him money. Then there was Elton John. To Elton, Leon was a hero and a mentor. Their piano styles were different, but the influence was undeniable. That's why Decades later, Elton tracked him down for a collaboration, when Leon had all but disappeared from the public eye. That partnership led to The Union in 2010, a Grammy-nominated album that brought Leon back into the spotlight, even if just for a while. Still, Leon never fully embraced that spotlight. He'd do a round of interviews, appear on stage, smile politely, and then disappear again. He didn't hate people, but he just didn't need the noise. He was in it for the music, and once that was done, he wanted to be left alone. But Hollywood doesn't like people who disappear. There's a reason so many insiders labeled Leon as uncooperative. It wasn't that he was rude or difficult to deal with. It was the fact that he didn't bend to the rules, he didn't try to fake his charm. If a producer tried to over-polish a track, Leon would pull the plug. If a label executive wanted to change the album art, Leon would walk, and this made people uncomfortable. As a result, there were fallouts. And over the years, a few conflicts did pop up. There were rumors of tension between Leon and some producers during the mid-70s. The rumors claimed that he didn't like being told how to sound. He didn't trust big label execs. And at Shelter Records, the label he co-founded, he sometimes butted heads with his business partner, Denny Cordell. The two were creative powerhouses, but they had different visions. And eventually, they went their separate ways. There were whispers, too, about a falling out with Joe Cocker after their legendary Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour. The tour had been brilliant, but chaotic. There were too many people, too much pressure, and not enough control. Leon had been the musical director, holding it all together, but the aftermath left some bruises. According to some accounts, Cocker felt pushed out of his own spotlight. Leon felt unappreciated. They didn't talk much after that. It wasn't a public feud, but it left a crack in what had once been a tight partnership. And then, of course, there was the industry itself. Leon never trusted it. He saw how it chewed up artists and spat them out. He watched friends fall into addiction, get used by labels, and lose everything. So, he kept his circle small, and while that independent streak made him a legend to some, it made him a problem to others. He didn't care about being liked. He cared about being honest, even if that honesty made him an outsider. But even as people called him weird, even as he drifted from the spotlight, the biggest names in music never forgot him. They kept his name alive. They cited him as an influence. And when he walked into a room, even years later, people stood up. Because weird or not, Leon Russel had something most artists never find, and that was total authenticity. And somewhere along the way, even as he kept his world tightly closed, a few unexpected people managed to break through that wall. One of them was Cher. Leon's connection with Cher. In the world of music, some collaborations are loud and obvious, but then there are the quiet connections, the ones whispered about behind studio walls, and the ones that don't always leave a paper trail, but a lasting impression. And Leon Russel and Cher were one of those. It was the early 1970s, and Hollywood was in a state of creative chaos. Glam rock was coming up, disco was taking shape, and the walls between genres were starting to crack. Everyone was reinventing themselves. Everyone was trying to stay ahead of the curve. And then there was Cher. She was already a household name, with magazine covers and the like, but she was also navigating a major life shift. Her split from Sonny Bono wasn't just a personal breakup, it was the end of a brand and a formula that had worked for years. Now she had to figure out what came next, who she was without Sonny, and what her voice could sound like on its own. Leon, on the other hand, wasn't dealing with tabloids or TV shows. He was deep in music, starting something new. He had just co-founded Shelter Records and was quietly building a creative space that welcomed artists who didn't quite fit the mainstream, especially women. And not just any women, but powerhouse women with soul, grit, and big voices. People like Freddie King, Rita Coolidge, and Claudia Lanier passed through his orbit during those years. Shelter wasn't just a label. It was almost like a little music universe tucked away from the noise of the industry. And that's when the whispers started. They also shared mutual friends, including Phil Spector, Delaney and Bonnie, and Elton John. All of them were known for either being ahead of their time or totally out of step with it. Cher and Leon both floated in that circle, orbiting the same wild musical galaxy. It wasn't surprising that their paths crossed. Initially, there were also rumors back then talking about the two of them having test runs and some quiet studio sessions. Some say they collaborated on a few scattered studio sessions throughout the early to mid-1970s. Cher also recorded a song written by Leon called Superstar, which was also covered by Rita Coolidge, Peggy Lee, and others. That's not all. They also worked together on the TAMI show in 1964, a major event with a large lineup of artists, and Leon was part of the house band that provided music and backing for various acts, including Cher. Leon had that effect. He could walk into a studio, sit down at the piano, and shift the entire atmosphere. He didn't need to say much. His playing did the talking. Leon and Cher had something. Maybe not a full-on musical partnership, but there was a connection. Their mutual respect ran deeper than any forgotten track or quiet collaboration. Both artists saw in each other a kind of rebellion. Cher never played into industry expectations, and Leon built his whole career on avoiding them. They might not have made a hit record together, but they definitely shared creative ground. And it mattered. In a way, their connection reflected the larger story of Leon's entire career. He never chased fame, but he left fingerprints everywhere, even in Cher's journey, and now she's finally talking about it. But what's more heartbreaking about Leon Russel is the fact that after a while in the industry, he began to disappear quietly. He faded from the charts, from the front pages, and from the studios. The man who once played beside Dylan, stole the show at Bangladesh, and inspired a young Elton John was suddenly hard to find. And the reasons for that would shock you. Leon Russel's later life struggles. By the time the Juneteenth 80s rolled around, the music world had shifted. MTV was in full swing. Synthesizers were everywhere. The sound of the industry had gone slick and shiny, and rock icons from the 60s and 70s either reinvented themselves or got left behind. But Leon Russel didn't reinvent himself. He didn't dye his hair, chase trends, or hire stylists. He didn't collaborate with pop stars of the moment or show up at flashy parties. He didn't even stick around Los Angeles. Instead, Leon quietly slipped out of the spotlight. The man who once toured with Bob Dylan, shook stages with Joe Cocker, and held his own alongside George Harrison was suddenly missing. By the mid-1980s, Leon's fame had faded almost entirely. His albums stopped charting. Radio stations weren't playing his songs anymore. The wild-haired, mysterious genius who once lit up stages in rhinestone suits now seemed like a name from a different era, if people even remembered the name at all. And for someone who had been so fiercely independent and so focused on making his kind of music, the drop-off hit hard. Leon wasn't just losing fans. He was losing financial ground too. The Shelter Records legacy, which once brought him creative freedom and a unique space in the industry, had become complicated. Ownership battles, contract disputes, and changing markets chipped away at what he had built. By the time the dust settled, Leon had had to leave the very recording business he helped create. Without radio play, without chart-topping records, and without the legal power to cash in on his past successes, Leon was in trouble. And financially, things got tight. There were years when he barely toured, when the venues got smaller, when paychecks were late or didn't come at all. Behind the scenes was a man trying to hold things together and struggling. But then, his health began to falter too. People around him said he always seemed to be in pain, but he rarely talked about it. He was private like that. For years, he kept working through it, writing, recording, and showing up when he could. But the truth is, his body was slowing down, and eventually, it caught up with him. By the early 2000s, Leon had developed serious health problems. One of the most alarming was a buildup of brain fluid, which caused fatigue, memory issues, and confusion. At first, many fans thought he was just aging and burned out after decades of touring, but it was more than that. He eventually underwent brain surgery in 2010 to relieve the pressure. The procedure helped, but it wasn't a fix-all. The recovery was long, and for someone who had always been so sharp and in control of his art, the health setbacks were humbling. Still, Leon kept going in his own way. He retreated to a quiet life on a small farm in Tennessee, nearly off the grid. There were no paparazzi, no big entourages, just Leon, his instruments, and the silence he seemed to prefer. To most fans, it felt like he was gone. The world had moved on, and Leon hadn't tried to catch up. Occasionally, die-hard music lovers would spot him on a small stage, still behind the piano, sunglasses on, silver hair flowing, but he wasn't making headlines anymore. And he didn't seem to mind. But the mystique around him only grew. There were rumors about what he was doing, what he was writing, and who he stayed in touch with. Some fans swore he was still working on something big. Others thought he had retired for good. But most just assumed he'd stepped away from the world for good. And then, on November 13, 2016, the hearts of his fans around the world were shattered when Leon Russel passed away in his sleep at the age of 74. It was a quiet exit, just like the last years of his life. The official cause was a heart attack, but in truth, Leon had been battling health complications for a while, some known, some not. His body had taken a beating from years of touring, decades of working around the clock, and the stress of a career filled with both triumphs and heartbreak. His death didn't come with the massive headlines it deserved. No weeks of tributes on every channel, no Hollywood documentary rush. Of course, there were touching statements from peers, but to the general public, it was almost like a quiet footnote. And maybe Leon would have liked it that way, because he was never one to crave attention. Fame was never the fuel. For Leon, it was always about the music, the moment, and the message. He didn't want to be a star, he just wanted to create. But the truth is, his passing left a space in the music world that still hasn't been filled. There was something about Leon that couldn't be duplicated. The grit, the grace, the gospel fire in his voice. It wasn't until after his death that a wave of reflection started to roll in. People began revisiting old footage, re-listening to albums, and discovering the brilliance that had gone overlooked for so long. And quietly, among those whose comments on Leon Russel resurfaced, was Cher. She spoke about the man behind the piano, about what could have been, and about the one moment in the early 1970s that stayed with her all these years later. Legends speak on Leon's legacy. You wouldn't expect a major revelation about Leon Russel to come from a casual moment in a music documentary, but that's exactly how it happened. In the acclaimed documentary The Wrecking Crew, Cher briefly opens a window into a wild and unforgettable studio moment, one that, in her own words, pretty much defined who Leon Russel really was. The story was simple, and it happened during a recording session with legendary producer Phil Spector. Cher said it was a typical day in the studio until Leon Russel walked in. But he wasn't just late, he was drunk. Spector, known for being strict and overbearing in the studio, wasn't amused. He snapped at Leon and questioned whether he even knew what respect meant. But Leon, cool and completely unfazed, fired back with a line that cracked the whole room up. That was Leon in a nutshell. Wild, raw, a little reckless, but always sharp, always fearless. Even drunk, even under pressure, he never lost that spark. That moment stayed with Cher for decades, and she spoke about how the entire room burst into a fit of laughter and how surprising the experience was. Not just because of what he had said, but because Leon was known to always stay quiet. It was a glimpse into the kind of man Leon Russel really was. He was chaotic, yet controlled, unfiltered, but always a step ahead. The type of person who could unsettle someone like Phil Spector and still get the last laugh. And maybe that's why Cher remembered it so vividly. In an industry built on polish and image, Leon walked into that room, wrecked the mood, stood his ground, and made everyone remember his name. Cher never recorded a full duet with Leon Russel, and they never became a headline-making duo. But that didn't matter. That one encounter seemed to say more than a whole album could. It wasn't just about music. It was about presence, about energy, and about the way Leon left a lasting mark on every room he entered. But he wasn't just memorable to Cher. Leon Russel's impact stretched across decades, touching some of the most influential artists of all time. When he passed away in 2016, the music world didn't just mourn, it paid deep personal tribute. Elton John, for one, didn't hold back. He had long called Leon one of his biggest musical heroes. In fact, he credited Leon with shaping the very sound that helped Elton rise to fame. Their 2010 collaboration, The Union, was Elton's way of reintroducing Leon to the world, a personal mission to make sure the younger generation didn't forget what the man had done. The album was a critical and commercial success, even earning a Grammy nomination. But more than anything, it was a love letter, a thank you note. George Harrison also had strong ties to Leon, especially around the time of the 1971 concert for Bangladesh. Leon played piano and stole the spotlight during a powerful medley that included Jumpin' Jack Flash and Young Blood. He wasn't just supporting George, he was also matching him step for step in front of a packed house at Madison Square Garden. Bob Dylan, never one for emotional tributes, let his history with Leon speak for itself. The two had collaborated several times, and those close to Dylan said he deeply respected Leon's musical instincts. Even artists outside that tight-knit 1970s circle also recognized Leon Russel as someone who paved the way for unconventional genius. He was country, rock, gospel, and blues all in one, and never once asked for permission to be that way. It's easy to remember someone for their most polished hits, but Leon Russel wasn't built for polish. He was built for passion. In the end, the people who knew him best, who stood beside him, sang with him, and learned from him, didn't talk about chart positions or awards. They talked about his mind, his music, his spirit, and how he never let the world define him. What's your favorite Leon Russel song? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you love juicy deep dives into celebrity lives, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new video.